There's a moment, often quiet and private, when someone who has been hurt whispers to themselves, "They should feel what I felt." It's not shouted. It's not always deliberate, but it lingers an ache to transfer the pain outward, to balance the scale by making the other person hurt too. This illusion, the idea that pain can resolve pain, is deeply human. We believe somewhere inside that if the other suffers, we'll finally feel better, that somehow our emotional ledger will be balanced and justice will be served. But in truth, pain doesn't heal resentment. It feeds it. In a small village long ago, a boy was wrongly accused of stealing a loaf of bread. The village elder, respected by all, ordered him to be punished in front of everyone, lashings in the square. His family watched in silence, shame pouring down their faces. But the truth? The boy had not stolen anything. Another boy, richer, more cunning, had framed him. Years passed. The boy grew up, quiet and withdrawn. The injustice carved lines into his heart, like wind etching rock. When he became a man, he returned to the village with success, wealth, and a secret plan. He humiliated the elder's family publicly, exposing their faults. He manipulated property trades, stripping the rich boy's family of their land. Each act was executed with calm precision. And yet he did not sleep better. His chest still ached at night. The resentment still flared when he walked past the square where he was once beaten. The fire that burned within had not gone out, it had spread. Now it consumed more. You see, revenge is a fire that promises warmth, but only burns. It tricks us with its glow. It tells us we'll feel better, that justice will rise from ashes. But it never tells us that we're the ones turning into smoke. In Buddhism, this illusion is called the path of dukkha, the cycle of suffering that feeds itself. When we strike back, when we cling to the idea of retaliation, we become tethered to the very pain we wish to release. We are not free, we are bound. There is a Zen proverb: holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Even modern psychology agrees. Studies show that those who ruminate on revenge or replay painful experiences are more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and even physical illness. The mind doesn't heal by clinging, it heals by understanding, by transforming. But transformation doesn't come quickly. It isn't glamorous. It doesn't have the drama of confrontation or the satisfaction of winning. Instead, it often begins in silence, in stillness. Have you ever watched a pond disturbed by a thrown stone? The ripples stretch out far, but they always return to stillness if we don't keep throwing more stones. When we retaliate, we throw another. When we blame, another. When we rehearse our resentment, daily more stones. The first step to peace is no longer feeding the ripple. The Buddha did not teach that pain could be avoided. He taught that it could be understood, that we could see it clearly, not as something to project, but as something to embrace, understand, and eventually release. Like a knot in the stomach that loosens slowly, not by pulling harder, but by softening the hand. In our world today, full of online arguments, silent grudges, and subtle comparisons, we are drowning in stones. Social media makes revenge fashionable. Sarcasm is applauded. Public call-outs are the new lashings in the square. But inside, our hearts remain knotted. What if we chose a different path? What if, instead of replaying the injury, we observed it? Instead of fantasizing about their downfall, we gave ourselves permission to heal? This doesn't mean we excuse cruelty. It means we don't let it own us. Forgiveness isn't about the other person, it's about freedom. Pain doesn't fix resentment. If it did, the world would be full of peace by now. Instead, it's still bleeding, still spinning, still throwing stones. But you, yes, you can be the one to stop. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to say, I won't carry this anymore. And in that moment, your healing begins not with fire, but with breath. A quiet exhale, a small surrender, a return to stillness. It often begins so small, not with an explosion, but with a whisper, a missed thank you, a slight in a conversation, a promotion given to someone else, a friend who forgot your birthday, a parent who favored the other child. It slips in quietly, this seed called resentment, almost invisible at first, but it takes root deep and stubborn. The human heart is fertile ground. Whatever is planted there grows, and resentment fed by silence, watered by rumination, blooms with thorns. In Buddhism, this is the teaching of vipaka, the result of karma, not only in action, but in inner cultivation. What we carry inside, whether peace or poison, inevitably shapes our experience of the world. And resentment is among the most potent of inner poisons, because it feels so justified. We believe we're right to feel it. After all, weren't we wronged? But rightness is not the same as wellness. The heart can be justified in its anger and still suffer immensely under its weight. There is a story of two monks walking through a forest. They come upon a river, and by its banks stands a woman, hesitant, afraid to cross. The older monk offers to carry her. He lifts her gently, brings her across, and sets her down on the other side. The younger monk follows in silence. Hours pass. Eventually, the younger monk bursts out. We took a vow never to touch a woman, yet you carried her. The elder monk smiles gently. I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? Resentment is like that. We carry people, events, even entire years long after they've passed. We think we've moved on, but inside we're still gripping the moment. Modern life is full of triggers for this. In families, a sibling's success may become a mirror of our own perceived inadequacy. At work, recognition given to others becomes fuel for silent comparison. In relationships, past words echo long after the apology, if it ever came. And so we rehearse the pain. Like a bitter song we know by heart, we replay the lyrics. They never saw my value. They took advantage of me. They didn't care. The Buddha spoke of Vedana feeling tones. Every experience brings a flavor, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. But it's not the flavor that causes suffering. It's our grasping or pushing away that creates the knot. Resentment is clinging to the unpleasant, feeding it, naming it, letting it define us. But what if we paused? What if we sat with the feeling instead of the story? A modern man, overwhelmed with bitterness toward his absent father, came to a Zen teacher. He never said he loved me, the man explained. He never showed up. I can't forgive him. The teacher replied, You may not be ready to forgive, but can you put down the sword you hold against your own heart? That question landed like thunder in the man's chest. because sometimes resentment becomes the story we live inside. We don't just feel wronged, we become the one who was wronged. And from that place, every joy feels suspicious, every peace temporary. We wear resentment like armor, believing it protects us. But armor is heavy, and over time it keeps us from dancing, from embracing, from healing. In the scriptures, the Buddha taught that metta, loving kindness, is the antidote to ill will, not just toward others, but toward ourselves. Because often, behind resentment toward another is the deeper wound of feeling unloved, unseen, or not enough. To begin softening, we can start with honesty. I am still hurt. I am still angry. I wanted to be treated differently. These are not weaknesses, they are truth. And truth opens doors. Then, gently, we ask, what am I afraid will happen if I let this go? What would I be without this story? What part of me still needs holding? The answers may not come quickly, but even asking begins to loosen the soil around the seed. And here lies the great turning. When we stop feeding resentment, we begin feeding understanding. That's when the heart, once armored and rigid, becomes fertile for something new. Not overnight, but over time, through breath, through silence, through the sacred pause between reaction and reflection. Because while resentment begins as a seed, so does compassion. Both grow. We choose which to water. In the dry season, when the rivers shrink and the trees grow thin, the animals of the forest gather closer to the same watering holes. The sun is harsh and patience is short. Even the gentle turn sharp under scarcity. Once, in a great forest bordered by mountains and sky, lived an old elephant. His name was Anuro. He had walked the forest longer than any other, his back bearing the dust of many journeys, his tusks chipped from battles fought and avoided. Anuro had once been a leader wise, measured, beloved. But in one brutal year, he was attacked by a younger bull, eager to dominate. The battle had been short, and Anuro was left limping, wounded not only in body, but in spirit. He retreated deep into the forest, far from the herds, far from the memories. There bitterness grew like vines in his heart. He replayed the moment of betrayal again and again. He recalled every blow, every roar, every face that turned away. He imagined how he would return stronger, how he would make them all see, make them all regret. He would show them what it meant to wound the old. One day, as he drank from a quiet stream, he noticed a bird with a broken wing. She struggled at the water's edge, her breathing shallow, her eyes clouded. Anuro watched. He could have stepped away, but something in the fragility of her moment stirred something ancient in him. He gently lifted her with his trunk, carried her to a shaded place, dropped fruits nearby, and left. The next day she was gone, but a strange quiet had settled inside him. Days passed, then weeks. The forest spoke in winds and rustles, and Anuro began to listen again, not to the voices of revenge, but to the rhythms of life itself. He started noticing how even the broken trees provided shade, how the ants carried on, unbothered by his large feet, how the water moved around rocks rather than through them. He came upon a young calf trapped between two stones. Her cries were sharp, filled with fear. Without thinking, Anuro moved the stones, steady and sure. The calf ran off without a thank you, but again, something loosened in his chest. His days became filled with these moments. quiet service, no fanfare, no audience. And slowly the rage that had kept his muscles tense, the grief that had dulled his eyes, began to fade like mist at dawn. One morning, a group of elephants wandered into his part of the forest. Among them, the very bull who had once defeated him. He was older now, too, and limping. They locked eyes. Time slowed. Anuro felt the old fire rise, but it was different now. Quieter. Wiser. He did not move to charge. He did not turn away. He simply bowed his head, and the bull, surprised, bowed in return. Nothing more was said, but in that silence a chapter closed. The forest sighed with relief. You see, we all carry wounds. Some are visible scars, limps, lines on the face. Others are hidden betrayals, lost years, the ache of not being seen. And the instinct to protect ourselves by hardening is natural. But it is not the only way. In Buddhist teachings there is a path not of retaliation, but of transformation. It is called karunyu compassion, born not from pity, but from shared understanding. It is the strength that says, I have suffered, and so I choose not to pass suffering forward. Anuro's story is not about forgetting. He remembered, but memory no longer ruled him. His power returned not as dominance, but as presence, as peace. So many of us are waiting for the moment we can return stronger to prove our worth, to undo the shame. But true strength is not in striking back, it's in the choice not to. It's in the steady, quiet acts that declare, I will not be made bitter by what broke me. I will choose the path that builds even when I was torn down. There is a power in that kind of peace. Not loud, but unmistakable. Not fast, but eternal. And like all deep truths, it begins with one choice. To stop rehearsing the pain and start living the healing. Even in the quietest corners of the forest, peace finds those who are willing to lay down their anger. Letting go does not mean forgetting. This is a truth many misunderstand. To let go of resentment does not mean we erase the past. It means we stop allowing it to control the present. There's a quiet difference between memory and attachment. Memory is natural, it reminds us, teaches us, shapes us. But attachment to pain is a choice. A quiet, often unconscious choice, but a choice nonetheless. Many people fear that if they forgive, they're excusing the harm. That if they release their resentment, they'll lose their story, or even their dignity. But in truth, it is resentment that erodes dignity. It keeps us tethered to a moment that no longer exists, draining our energy like a wound we refuse to stop picking. A woman once came to a Buddhist monk, her voice trembling with a mix of grief and fury. My sister betrayed me, she said. She took everything our family home, our inheritance. And yet she walks around like nothing happened. The monk listened silently. After a long pause, he said softly, And how long have you carried her on your back? The woman blinked. What do you mean? Every day you recall her face, her words, her silence. You carry her wherever you go. Even when she's not near, she lives inside you. You gave her that home. Letting go, he explained, is not giving the other person a gift. It's giving yourself the right to walk freely again. We often think our story defines us. But the Buddha taught that identity built on clinging is like building a house on sand. The winds of memory, regret, and resentment constantly shift our foundation, leaving us unsteady. Instead, he encouraged a practice of updana parinidhan, a cooling of grasping. Like setting down a heavy bundle we've carried across mountains, unaware how much it has weighed us down. Consider this. When you carry a rock in your hand for a moment, it's nothing. But if you carry it for hours, it aches. Days and it deforms your grip. Years and your entire posture changes. The memory is the rock. The resentment is the grip. Letting go doesn't throw the rock away. It simply releases your fingers. You can still remember what happened. You can still speak your truth, but from a place of calm, from a place no longer burning. Christian teachings echo this wisdom. In the book of Matthew, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This rest is not only for the body, but for the heart, for the soul weighed down by what was never ours to carry indefinitely. Letting go is a process. Sometimes it's 1,000 tiny surrenders. Sometimes it's a single breath. One man, after decades of holding anger toward his father, sat down at the edge of a lake. He spoke aloud, not to his father, but to the part of himself still waiting for an apology that would never come. "I forgive you," he whispered, "and then I forgive me for waiting so long." The breeze didn't change. The water didn't ripple. But something in his chest softened. Forgiveness is not only outward. It must also turn inward. We often blame ourselves for not letting go sooner, for not being stronger, for breaking under pressure. But healing is not a race. It is a rhythm. And everyone learns to dance at their own pace. In Buddhist practice, there is a meditation called Metta Bhavana, loving kindness meditation. It begins with offering compassion to oneself, then gradually extending it to others, loved ones, strangers, even enemies. Not because the enemy deserves it, but because you deserve peace. To release resentment is to reclaim your freedom. To say, "This may have shaped me, but it does not define me." To live forward instead of replaying backward. So no, letting go is not forgetting. It is remembering with wisdom, not pain. It is keeping the lesson, but releasing the wound. It is standing tall, even if the past tried to bend you. It is knowing that you are more than what was done to you, and that your life, your peace, your joy begin again every time you choose to breathe more gently into the present. Pain is persuasive. It speaks in a voice that feels ancient and intimate, like it knows you better than you know yourself. It says, "Hold on to me, I'll protect you. Stay angry, it'll make you strong. Don't forgive, you'll look weak." And perhaps the most dangerous whisper, if you let go, they win. But pain is not your protector. Pain is not your friend. Pain, when clung to, becomes a mask, one we wear so long we forget what we looked like before we put it on. There's a Buddhist story of a monk who carried a bowl of coals to warm his cold hands. At first, it worked. The heat gave him comfort. But as the fire dimmed, he clutched it tighter, refusing to let go. "If I drop it now," he thought, "I'll have nothing." By morning, his hands were burned. The fire that once comforted became the very thing that harmed him most. We often confuse pain with strength. We say, "Look how much I've endured," as if endurance alone is virtue. But the Buddha didn't teach us to survive our suffering. He taught us to transform it. He showed that when we wrap our identity around pain, we close the door to peace. Modern life reinforces this illusion. Social media thrives on outrage. News thrives on fear. Personal narratives grow louder with victimhood because it brings validation, sympathy, even status. But the wise know the deepest healing is quiet. It happens in silence and stillness, in choices made when no one is watching. Pain promises justice, but true justice comes from clarity, not vengeance. Pain promises memory, but memory doesn't require misery. Pain promises power, but the strongest person in the room is often the one who can say, "I am not this story anymore." A man once visited a Zen master, furious at his business partner's betrayal. "He took everything," the man said. "I'll never forgive him." The master poured 2 cups of tea. He handed one to the man and said, "Drink." The man looked at the cup. "It's bitter," he spat. "Yes," the master nodded. "Because I filled it with poison." "Why would you give me poison?" the man asked, recoiling. "You've been drinking it every day," the master replied, "and you wonder why you still suffer." The mind justifies our pain. The ego decorates it like a shrine, but the heart longs to be free. And freedom does not come from proving others wrong. It comes from no longer needing to. In the Christian tradition, Paul the Apostle writes, "When I was a child, I thought like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Anger, bitterness, and revenge, these are the childish things. Not in innocence, but in immaturity." True growth is choosing the higher road, even when the lower one feels more familiar. There is an old proverb, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers." It's easy to remember pain. It's harder to remember peace, because peace doesn't scream. It whispers. So how do we turn away from the false promises of pain? First, by recognizing them. When you feel that rush of indignation, ask yourself, what am I truly trying to protect? Then, breathe. Bring awareness to the body. Pain lives in the chest, the throat, the belly. Feel it without judgment. Then ask, what would it feel like to not need this story anymore? You don't have to let it go all at once. Sometimes we release by inches, but each step away from pain is a step toward life. Letting go is not forgetting the wound. It's refusing to scratch it until it bleeds again. It's saying, I've carried this long enough. In Buddhist teaching, pain is part of dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life. But dukkha is not destiny. It's a doorway, and beyond it lies sukha, ease, joy, freedom. So the next time pain whispers, remember, you are not a container for sorrow. You are not a monument to what went wrong. You are a living being capable of healing, of changing, of releasing. The false promises of pain may echo loudly, but peace? Peace keeps its promises. There is a moment quiet and small when something inside begins to shift. Maybe it's not dramatic. Maybe it comes as a whisper while washing dishes, or a breath during a walk, or the gentle ache of an old memory no longer hurting the way it used to. But it comes, and in that moment you realize you are not your resentment. You are not your pain. You are not even the story you've told yourself again and again to make sense of it all. You are the space beneath the story, the stillness beneath the waves. Reclaiming the present means remembering that now is the only place your life truly exists. Not in the past you replay, not in the future you fear, but here in this breath, in this body, in this silence. When the Buddha spoke of liberation, he didn't mean escape. He meant awakening to see things as they are, not as our wounded mind paints them. And what we often find is that life, even in its messiness, is tender. It still offers beauty, not in spite of our pain, but sometimes because of it. A woman once came to a temple carrying her grief like a stone. Her son had died. She couldn't let go. She asked the monks for a ritual, a prayer, anything to bring him back. Instead, they gave her a task. Find a household in the village, they said, where death has not touched. She went door to door, and every family, without exception, told her their own story of loss. A brother, a mother, a husband, a child. She returned days later with empty hands and tear-filled eyes. "I understand," she whispered. "I am not alone." Grief didn't vanish, but it softened. And in that softening she re-entered the world, not as someone broken, but as someone broken open. This is the beginning of rewriting the story, not erasing the past, but reclaiming your authorship of what comes next. The Christian mystic Julian of Norwich once wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." She didn't say this from comfort. She wrote it in a time of plague, of sorrow, of great uncertainty. Yet her faith allowed her to see something greater, not beyond suffering, but within it. And this is the quiet miracle, that after all the anger, all the loss, all the nights of silence and clenched fists, you can still choose to open your heart. You can still choose peace. To reclaim the present is not to forget what was done. It is to say, I am not frozen in that moment anymore. I am here. I am breathing. I am becoming. It is to feel the ground under your feet and say, this moment is mine, not theirs. This peace is mine. I do not owe it to anyone's approval. This story continues, and I choose how it's told. Maybe there are no grand resolutions. Maybe no one apologizes. Maybe the pain doesn't fully go away. But you can walk lighter. You can live with your heart unclenched. You can see the same sky that others see and feel joy. And when resentment tries to return, and it will, you recognize it for what it is, an old habit, not a truth. You'll nod gently. You'll smile. And you'll say, not today. Because healing is not a destination. It is a way of walking, one story at a time, one breath at a time, one gentle refusal to let the past define you forever. And so this chapter ends not with an answer, but with a beginning, a door opening, a heart softening, a story rewritten in light.